The rain hammered against the windows of the Black Lotus Casino in Gangnam, Seoul's most notorious underground gambling den. Inside his private office on the top floor, 72-year-old Kang Min-ho sat behind a mahogany desk that had witnessed decades of deals, threats, and blood money. His silver hair was slicked back perfectly, his tailored Italian suit worth more than most people earned in a year. But tonight, the most feared mafia boss in South Korea wasn't thinking about territory disputes or drug shipments. He was thinking about his granddaughter. Min-ho's weathered hands trembled slightly as he held a faded photograph, the edges worn from years of handling. The picture showed a little girl with pigtails, maybe 5 years old, laughing as she reached for bubbles in a sunny park. His son, Ji-hoon, stood behind her, young and alive, before the car accident that took him and his wife 8 years ago. "Boss," his right-hand man, Tae-sung, knocked and entered. "The lawyer is here." Min-ho placed the photo down carefully. "Send him in." Attorney Lee Sang-min entered, his expensive briefcase and nervous energy filling the room. Despite representing Seoul's criminal elite for 2 decades, he still felt his throat tighten in Min-ho's presence. "Mr. Kang, I have news about your granddaughter." Min-ho's dark eyes snapped up. "You found her?" "Yes, but—" Sang-min hesitated, pulling out a manila folder. "The situation is complicated." "Speak plainly, or I'll have Tae-sung rip your tongue out." Sang-min swallowed hard. "After your son and daughter-in-law died, custody went to your daughter-in-law's sister, Park Mi-sun. You remember, you were serving time when it happened." Min-ho's jaw clenched. 3 years in Seoul Detention Center for racketeering. 3 years when his family fell apart. "Mi-sun moved to Busan with your granddaughter, Soo-jin. You authorized the $2 million trust fund to be managed by Mi-sun until Soo-jin turned 25. "I remember all this," Min-ho growled. "Where is my granddaughter now?" Sang-min opened the folder, revealing surveillance photos that made Min-ho's blood run cold. A young woman, maybe 19 or 20, with hollow cheeks and dirty clothes, standing in line at a soup kitchen. Another photo showed her sleeping on a cot in what was clearly a homeless shelter. "This can't be." Min-ho's voice cracked, something Tae-sung had never heard in 15 years of service. "Park Mi-sun died of cancer 2 years ago," Sang-min continued. "But before she died, she married a man named Choi Dong-hyun, a gambling addict. When Mi-sun passed, Dong-hyun gained legal guardianship of Soo-jin and control of the trust fund as her stepfather. And he's been draining it. Gambling, bad investments, debt payments to loan sharks. The $2 million is almost gone. He kicked Soo-jin out 6 months ago when she turned 19, told her the money was his, that you were a criminal who abandoned her, and that she should be grateful he didn't turn her over to social services years ago." Min-ho stood slowly, his chair scraping against the marble floor. At 72, he was still built like a fighter, his presence commanding the room. Where is this Choi Dong-hyun now? Still in Busan, he lives in a luxury apartment in Haeundae funded by what's left of the trust fund. And Soo-jin? Gwangju Women's Shelter. She's been there for 3 months, works part-time at a convenience store, trying to save enough for a deposit in a room. Min-ho felt something he hadn't experienced in decades, tears burning behind his eyes. He blinked them away furiously. Why didn't she come to me? Sang-min's voice softened. "Boss, she doesn't know you. Dong-hyun told her you were dead, said you died in prison. She thinks she has no family left." The office fell silent except for the rain and the distant sounds of slot machines from the casino floor below. Min-ho walked to the window, looking out at Seoul's glittering skyline. He'd built an empire through fear and violence. He controlled half the illegal gambling in South Korea, ran protection rackets from Incheon to Daegu, and had politicians and police chiefs on his payroll. But he couldn't protect his own granddaughter. "Tae-sung," Min-ho said quietly, "get the car ready. We're going to Gwangju." "Boss, it's a 3-hour drive in this weather." "I don't care if it's a 3-day drive through hell. My granddaughter is sleeping in a shelter. We leave in 10 minutes. The Gwangju Women's Shelter sat in a modest neighborhood, far from the glamour of Seoul's criminal underworld. It was 11 p.m. when Min-ho's black Mercedes pulled up to the curb, followed by 2 SUVs carrying his security detail. The shelter director, Mrs. Kim Hae-won, just locking up when she saw the convoy. Her first instinct was to call the police, but something about the silver-haired man who emerged from the Mercedes made her pause. He moved with authority, but his eyes held something she recognized: desperation. "Are you the director?" Min-ho asked, approaching with Tae-sung close behind. "Yes, and we're closed. If you need help." "I'm looking for someone. Kang Soo-jin. I'm her granddaughter." Mrs. Kim's expression shifted from suspicion to confusion. Soo-jin never mentioned family. "She doesn't know me. I'm alive. Please, I just need to know if she's here." Something in his voice, the rawness of a powerful man brought low, made Mrs. Kim nod. "She's here, but I can't just let strangers in at midnight, family or not. Come back tomorrow at 9 a.m. I'll speak with her first." Min-ho wanted to kick down the door, to demand entry, to use every ounce of his power to see his granddaughter immediately. But he'd learned something in 72 years. Sometimes power meant restraint. "Tomorrow, 9 a.m. He handed Mrs. Kim a business card with just a phone number. "If she needs anything tonight, anything at all, call me." Mrs. Kim took the card, noting the quality of the cardstock, the expensive car, and the dangerous-looking men in suits. "Who are you, really?" "I'm a man who failed his granddaughter. I'm trying to fix that." Inside the shelter, Kang Soo-jin lay awake on her bunk, listening to the sounds of 20 other women sleeping, coughing, crying softly in the darkness. At 19, she'd already lived several lifetimes of disappointment. She remembered her parents only in fragments: her father's laugh, her mother's perfume, the feeling of safety that vanished when they died. Aunt Mi's son had been kind at first, but always sad, always sick. And then came Dong-hyun. Soo-jin's hand unconsciously went to her ribs, where the bruises had finally faded from the last time Dong-hyun had beaten her for disrespecting him by asking about the trust fund her parents had supposedly left her. He'd thrown the legal papers at her face and screamed that she was a burden, that the money was compensation for him having to raise someone else's brat, that her grandfather had been a gangster who died in prison like the trash he was. She believed him because she had no reason not to. What did she know about Kang Min-ho except that he existed somewhere in old photographs, stern-faced and distant? Her father had never talked about him much, and when he did, it was with a mixture of love and pain that young Soo-jin hadn't understood. Now, lying in a shelter with 13,000 won in her pocket and her entire life in a backpack under her bed, Soo-jin understood pain quite well. Tomorrow she had a shift at the GS25 convenience store from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. If she saved every won for another month, she might have enough for a deposit in a gosiwon, one of those tiny rooms barely big enough for a bed. It wasn't much of a dream, but it was hers. She finally drifted to sleep, unaware that 3 floors below, the grandfather she thought was dead had just promised the shelter director he'd return in the morning. Min-ho didn't sleep. He sat in his hotel room at the Gwangju Shinsege, Tae-sung stationed outside his door, and went through every document Sang-min had compiled. Bank statements showing the systematic theft of Soo-jin's inheritance, medical records when she'd been admitted to the emergency room with a fall down the stairs, the classic excuse for abuse, school records showing a bright student whose grades collapsed after her aunt died. With each page, Min-ho's rage grew colder and more focused. He'd built his empire on violence, yes, but calculated violence, purposeful violence, the kind that sent messages and established order in the chaos of the criminal underworld. What Choi Dong-hyun had done was different. It was the violence of a coward and a thief, perpetrated against a child who had no power to fight back. Min-ho made a phone call at 3 a.m. "Boss," Tae-sung answered immediately, always alert. "I need you to compile everything on Choi Dong-hyun. Every debt, every casino he's visited, every loan shark he owes. I want to know which hand he uses to wipe his ass. I want it ready by morning." "Already done, boss. I anticipated the request." This was why Tae-sung was his right hand. "And?" He's into the Busan 7 for 80 million won, the Red Lotus Casino for another 50 million. He has 6 months before they take fingers. Buy his debts. Boss? You heard me. Buy every single debt this piece of garbage has accumulated. I want him to realize that he's been stealing from Kang Min-ho's granddaughter. Considered it done. Min-ho hung up and returned to the photographs of Soo-jin. In one, she was smiling at someone off camera, and for just a moment he saw his son Ji-hoon in her features, the same gentle eyes, the same hope that the world might be kind. He'd failed to protect Ji-hoon from a drunk driver. He'd been in prison when Soo-jin needed him most, but he was here now, and nothing, not the police, not rival gangs, not heaven or hell, would stop him from making this right. At 8:45 a.m., Mrs. Kim knocked on the door of the small room where Soo-jin was getting ready for work. "Soo-jin, can we talk?" The young woman opened the door. Why would he lie about that? Mrs. Kim chose her words carefully. "Honey, I've run this shelter for 12 years. I've seen a lot of bad situations, a lot of bad people. Your stepfather sounds like one of them. This man who came last night, I don't know who he is exactly, but he's clearly wealthy and powerful, and he looked absolutely heartbroken when he talked about you." Soo-jin's hands started shaking. "I don't understand." "He's coming back at 9. You don't have to meet him if you don't want to, but I think you should hear what he has to say. I have work at 10. I'll call your boss if you want. Tell them it's a family emergency." Family. The word felt foreign to Soo-jin. She'd been alone for so long that the concept seemed like something from another life. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll meet him." At exactly 9 a.m., Min-ho walked through the shelter's front door. He'd left his security detail outside, except for Tae-sung, trying to appear less intimidating. It didn't really work. Everything about Min-ho, from his bearing to his expensive watch to the barely concealed danger in his eyes, screamed power. Mrs. Kim met them in the small lobby. "She's agreed to meet you, but I'm staying in the room, and if she wants you to leave at any time, you leave. Understood?" Min-ho nodded. He'd faced down prosecutors, rival gang bosses, and corrupt politicians without flinching, but the idea of meeting his granddaughter terrified him. Mrs. Kim led them to a small meeting room with a table, a few chairs, and a window overlooking a modest garden. Soo-jin sat in a chair against the far wall, her backpack at her feet like she was ready to run. When Min-ho entered, their eyes met, and time seemed to stop. He saw Ji-hoon in her face, but also something of himself, the set of her jaw, the wariness in her gaze. She'd inherited his survival instincts. She saw a stranger, but something in his face made her chest tight. There was a photograph at Aunt Mi-sun's old apartment, hidden in a box of her father's things. A younger version of this man, standing with her father at some formal event, both of them uncomfortable in suits. "Soo-jin," Min-ho said, his voice rough with emotion. "My name is Kang Min-ho. I'm your father's father. You're supposed to be dead." "I know what you were told. Choi Dong-hyun lied to you about many things." She stood up, anger flashing across her face. "How dare you? You don't know anything about my life or what I've been through." "You're right, I don't, and that's my fault." Min-ho sat down slowly, making himself less imposing. "After your parents died, I was in prison, racketeering charges. I served 3 years. By the time I got out, you'd been moved to Busan with your aunt. I tried to find you, but Mi-sun had changed her information. I hired investigators, but they kept hitting dead ends. You could have tried harder." "You're absolutely right. I should have torn the country apart until I found you. Instead, I told myself you were better off without me, that my world was too dangerous for a little girl. I was a coward." Soo-jin blinked, surprised by his honesty. "Why are you here now?" Because I just found out you've been living in a shelter, that the $2 million trust fund your parents set up for you has been stolen, that Choi Dong-hyun kicked you out and left you with nothing." Her face paled. $2 million? Your father was a good businessman before he died. He had life insurance, investments, property. He and your mother set up the trust fund specifically for your education and future. It was supposed to be managed by your aunt and then transferred to you when you turned 25. Soo-jin felt the room spinning. Dong-hyun said there was no money. He said my parents left debt, that he was being generous by even giving me a place to live. Min-ho's hands clenched into fists under the table, but he kept his voice level. He lied, and he's been systematically stealing from you for years. Why? Soo-jin's voice broke. Why would he do that? I was just a kid when Aunt Mi-sun married him. I never did anything to him. Because he's a parasite who saw easy money, and because you had no one to protect you. Min-ho leaned forward slightly. But you have someone now, if you want. Soo-jin looked at this stranger who claimed to be her grandfather. Everything about him was intimidating. The expensive clothes, the dangerous aura, the way even Mrs. Kim seemed nervous around him. But his eyes, dark and intense, held something she recognized because she'd seen it in the mirror every day. Regret. Who are you, really? Not just my grandfather. What do you do? Min-ho appreciated her directness. I run an organization. Some people would call it a criminal empire. I control gambling operations, protection services, and various other businesses throughout South Korea. I've hurt people. I've broken laws. I'm not a good man, Soo-jin. But I loved your father more than anything in this world. When he died, something in me died too. I told myself I didn't deserve to be in your life, that you were better off thinking I was gone. He paused, his voice thick. I was wrong, and I'm sorry. I know I can't make up for 8 years of absence, but I want to try, if you'll let me. Soo-jin sat back down slowly. What happens now? First, we get you out of this shelter. I own an apartment building in Seoul with a vacant unit, fully furnished, secure, yours if you want it, no strings attached. If you want to stay in Gwangju, I'll arrange something here. I can't accept... Second, Min-ho continued, I'm going to recover what's left of your trust fund and ensure Choi Dong-hyun pays for what he's done to you. How I do that is my business. You don't need to be involved. And third? And third, I'd like to get to know my granddaughter. Maybe have dinner sometimes, talk on the phone. Let me be the grandfather I should have been all along. His voice softened. But if you want me to leave you alone, I will. I'll still fix the money situation, still make sure you're taken care of from a distance. This is your choice, Soo-jin. The room fell silent except for the ticking of a clock on the wall. Soo-jin looked at Mrs. Kim, who gave her an encouraging nod, then back at Min-ho. I have questions, Soo-jin said finally. Ask anything. Did your father know what you did, your business? Yes, he hated it. We fought about it constantly when he was growing up. He refused to have anything to do with my organization, became an accountant specifically to be different from me. Min-ho smiled sadly. He was a good man, like his mother. Your grandmother? She died when Ji-hoon was 15, cancer. She was the only person who could keep me in line. Min-ho's expression grew distant. Your father blamed me for her death, said the stress of my lifestyle killed her. He was probably right. Did you love her? More than anything, I still visit her grave every week. Soo-jin processed this. One more question. If I say yes to this, to getting to know you, will you ever lie to me? Min-ho met her eyes directly. I promise you I will never lie to you, but I may not be able to tell you everything about my business for your own safety. Can you accept that?" "I can accept that." "Okay, I want to try, but slowly. I'm not calling you grandfather or anything like that right away. You can call me Min-ho if you want, or Mr. Kang, whatever feels right. And I want to keep working. I'm not taking money I haven't earned." Min-ho smiled for the first time, a genuine expression that transformed his face. "Your father said the exact same thing when he turned 18 and I tried to give him a job. You're definitely his daughter." 3 days later, Soo-jin moved into a modest 2-bedroom apartment in Ma-po district. It wasn't in Min-ho's building after all. He'd realized that would feel too controlling, but in a safe neighborhood near Hong-ik University. The apartment was furnished, but not lavishly, practical but comfortable. Min-ho had wanted to buy her a luxury penthouse, but Tae-sung had wisely advised that Soo-jin needed to adjust slowly. Mrs. Kim helped Soo-jin pack up her few belongings, emotional about seeing another success story leave the shelter. Min-ho had donated 50 million won to the shelter anonymously, delivered by Tae-sung, with instructions that Mrs. Kim should never know the source. On moving day, Min-ho showed Soo-jin around the apartment, nervous as a teenager. "The refrigerator is stocked, there's a 24-hour convenience store downstairs. The security guard, Mr. Park, is one of my people. He'll make sure no one bothers you." "One of your people," Soo-jin repeated. "I'm still processing what that means."
"With what money? The trust fund you stole from your stepdaughter is almost depleted. You have no income, no assets that aren't mortgaged, no prospects." "I don't know what you're talking about." Min-ho opened a folder and slid bank statements across the desk. "These show systematic withdrawals from an account designated for Kang Soo-jin's education and welfare, money that her deceased parents set aside for her future, money that you, as her guardian, were legally obligated to protect." Dong-yeon's mouth went dry. "Kang Soo-jin? How do you—" "She's my granddaughter." The room temperature seemed to drop 20 degrees. Dong-yeon looked at the 2 large men flanking the door, at Kang Min-ho's cold eyes, and realized he wasn't leaving this room without paying a price. "I can explain," he stammered. "Me son, she was sick. The medical bills. Me son died 2 years ago. You've stolen another 40 million since then. I had expenses. I was supporting the girl. You kicked her out 6 months ago. She's been living in a homeless shelter, working at a convenience store for minimum wage, while you've been living in luxury on money stolen from her inheritance." Dong-yeon started crying. "Please, I'll pay back. I'll get a job. I'll—" "Shut up," Min-ho said quietly, and Dong-yeon's mouth snapped closed. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to sign over every asset you have to a trust I've established for Soo-jin. Your apartment, your car, the Rolex on your wrist that you bought with her money. Everything." "I'll have nothing." "You'll have your life, which is more than you deserve. Then you're going to the police station and confess to embezzlement and fraud regarding Soo-jin's trust fund. They'll arrest me. Yes, you'll serve probably 3 to 5 years. But here's the alternative." Min-ho leaned forward. "I can have my associates take you to an abandoned warehouse outside Busan. They'll break every finger on both hands, then move to your toes, then your ribs. They'll keep you alive and conscious through all of it, and when they're done, they'll dump you in an alley where you'll spend the rest of your life begging for change with mangled hands." "You can't do this." "Can I? You stole from Kang Min-ho's granddaughter. You beat her. You threw her away like trash. Every criminal organization in Korea would applaud me for what I'm about to do to you." Min-ho stood up, buttoning his suit jacket. "But my granddaughter is trying to believe people can be better than their worst impulses. So I'm giving you a choice, legal consequences or physical ones. You have 60 seconds to decide." Dong-yeon was sobbing now, understanding that he'd gambled with the wrong family's money. Legal. I'll go to the police. I'll confess everything. Smart choice, Min-ho nodded, to Tae-sung, who pulled out a stack of papers. Sign these. Asset transfers, notarized confession, everything. My lawyer is waiting outside to witness. Dong-yun signed with shaking hands, transferring everything he'd accumulated through Soo-jin's stolen inheritance back to her. When he was done, Min-ho had one more thing to say. If you ever try to contact Soo-jin, if you even think her name too loudly, I will forget about Mercy. Do you understand? Yes, Dong-yun whispered. Good. Tae-sung will drive you to the police station. Oh, and Mr. Choi, the prosecutor handling your case, is a friend of mine. He'll make sure you serve every single day of your sentence with no early parole. 2 months later, Soo-jin sat in a cafe near Hongik University with Min-ho, celebrating her re-enrollment. She'd aced the placement tests and would resume her studies in the spring semester. Between now and then, she'd been working part-time at a bookstore, not because she needed the money, but because staying busy kept her grounded. I got a letter from the prosecutor's office, Soo-jin said, stirring her coffee. Dong-yun pleaded guilty, 4 years in prison. How do you feel about that? Honestly, I thought I'd feel more satisfaction, but mostly I just feel tired, like I want to move on. Min-ho nodded. Revenge is overrated. Justice is enough. They'd been meeting weekly, these coffee dates where they slowly got to know each other. Min-ho told her stories about her father, some funny, some sad, all precious to Soo-jin, who'd lost so many memories. She told him about her dreams, her fears, the person she wanted to become. I've been thinking, Soo-jin said carefully, about your business. Min-ho tensed slightly. What about it? I don't approve of it. I think what you do hurts people, destroys families, perpetuates violence. You're not wrong. But, she continued, I also know you can't change overnight, and I know you're my grandfather, and I'm starting to care about you. So I guess I have to accept both things at once. I appreciate your honesty. For what it's worth, I've been thinking about scaling back. I'm 72. Maybe it's time to let younger, hungrier men fight over territories. Would you really retire? For you, I'd consider it. Min-ho smiled. Your father spent his whole life trying to make me go legitimate. Maybe his daughter will succeed where he couldn't. They talked for another hour about lighter things, her classes, a book she was reading, a stray cat that had adopted her apartment building, normal things, family things. As they were leaving, Soo-jin did something that surprised both of them. She hugged Min-ho, just a quick embrace, but it was the first physical affection between them. Thank you, she said, for finding me, for not giving up. Min-ho felt his eyes sting with tears for the second time in 72 years. Thank you for giving me a second chance. 6 months after that first meeting in the shelter, Soo-jin stood in front of her father's grave with Min-ho beside her. It was Ji-hun's death anniversary, and they'd come together to pay respects. Do you think he'd be proud of me? Soo-jin asked, placing flowers on the stone. He'd be incredibly proud. You survived things that would have broken most people. You kept your kindness, your hope. That takes real strength. Would he be proud of you? Min-ho considered the question. I think he'd be surprised that I'm trying to be better. That's a start. They stood in comfortable silence, 2 people connected by blood and loss, slowly building something new from the ruins of the past. Soo-jin's phone buzzed with a text from a classmate asking about study group times. She had friends now, a routine, a life that felt real and solid. The trust fund, what was left of it after Dong-yun's theft, was safely in her control now. Combined with the assets recovered, she had enough to finish school comfortably. But more importantly, she had family again. It was complicated and messy, and sometimes uncomfortable when she thought too hard about what Min-ho actually did for a living. But it was real. I have a question, Soo-jin said as they walked back to the car. Why did you really give up revenge against Dong-yun? The legal route feels too gentle for you. Min-ho chuckled. You're perceptive. Truth is, I wanted to destroy him, wanted to make him suffer the way he made you suffer. But then I thought about what your father would want. He always believed the legal system should handle things, even when it failed, so I honored his memory by doing it his way. But I stacked the deck. You said the prosecutor was your friend. I never said I played completely fair. Min-ho's eyes twinkled with dark humor. I just made sure justice actually happened for once. The rest of everything was blur. Taesung driving to the police station, the embarrassing need to wear cheap sweatpants after handing over all his clothes, signing economic forms in front of a money-laundering lawyer, the conversation with the prosecutor, whom Min-ho had clearly set up. Then the waiting room, the processing, the lighting of his jumpsuit, the final transfer of a dignity he'd never appreciated. It was highly uncomfortable, but if he gambled on Min-ho coming through his word, then he should survive, at least get his life back. 6 months later, Soo-jin sat in the office of Kang Enterprises, the legitimate holding company that controlled Min-ho's legal businesses. At 21, she was technically an intern, but everyone knew she was being groomed to eventually take over. Her business administration degree was nearly complete, and she'd proven herself sharp, ethical, and surprisingly ruthless when it came to rooting out inefficiency. The Incheon property deal went through, she reported to Min-ho during their weekly meeting. We outbid 3 other companies for the development rights. How much? 12 billion won, but the location is prime, and the city's offering tax incentives for mixed-use development. We'll make it back in 5 years if we build residential and commercial. Min-ho leaned back in his chair, impressed. Your father would have loved this. He always said real estate was smarter than gambling. He was right. Soo-jin pulled up a presentation on her laptop. I've been working on something else, a proposal for transitioning the protection rackets. Soo-jin.
Hear me out. What if instead of collecting protection money from businesses, we offered them actual security services? Legitimate contracts, licensed guards, insurance policies. We already have the infrastructure and the manpower. Most of my men aren't exactly hireable for legitimate security work. So we train them, get them licensed. The ones with serious criminal records can work back-end logistics instead of customer-facing roles. It's not perfect, but it's a start. Min-ho studied the proposal, seeing the careful thought she'd put into it. Transition plans, financial projections, legal frameworks. She'd even identified which of his lieutenants would be best suited for different roles in a legitimate operation. This would mean giving up significant revenue streams, he said carefully. In the short term, yes, but long term? Legitimate businesses grow. Criminal enterprises just survive until someone stronger takes over or the police finally get their evidence. Soo-jin met his eyes. You're 73, grandfather. How much longer do you want to spend looking over your shoulder? The word grandfather had started coming naturally about 3 months ago. Min-ho still felt a surge of warmth every time she said it. You're asking me to dismantle an empire I spent 50 years building. I'm asking you to build a different kind of empire, one your son would be proud of, one I can be proud to inherit. Taesung knocked and entered, carrying a folder. Boss, we have a situation, the Gwangju territory dispute. Lee Jin-woo is pushing back on the new boundaries. Min-ho felt the old instincts kick in. Territorial disputes were solved with violence, with shows of force, with carefully calculated brutality that sent messages to anyone else who might challenge him. But then he looked at Soo-jin, at her expectant face, at the future she was offering him. Set up a meeting, he said finally, a legitimate business meeting. If Lee wants the Gwangju territory that badly, maybe we can sell it to him for a fair price. Taesung's eyebrows shot up. Boss? You heard me. We're businessmen now. Let's act like it. After Taesung left, looking shock-shacked, Soo-jin smiled. That's a start. Don't get too excited. I'm not going to transform into a saint overnight. There are still parts of my organization that can't go legitimate, obligations I can't walk away from without starting a war. I know, but every step counts. 2 years later. Kang Soo-jin graduated summa cum laude from Chosun University with a degree in business administration. Min-ho sat in the audience, surrounded by families celebrating their children's achievements, feeling pride so intense it was almost painful. After the ceremony, they took photos together, grandfather and granddaughter, both dressed formally, both smiling genuinely. Someone looking at the pictures would never guess that the distinguished silver-haired man was once ordered the beating of a rival gang member, or that the young woman had once slept in a homeless shelter. "I have something for you," Min-ho said as they walked through the campus. He handed her an envelope. Inside were legal documents, ownership papers for a significant portion of Kang Enterprises' legitimate holdings, transferred to Soo-jin's name. "This is too much," she protested. "I'm 22, I can't run." "You won't be running anything alone. I'm still here, but it's time you had real stake in what we're building." Min-ho's expression grew serious. "I've also updated my will. When I die, everything legitimate goes to you. The remaining criminal interests will be dissolved or sold, with the proceeds going to various charities." "Grandfather, I'm 74, Soo-jin. I need to think about these things, and I want you to know that everything I'm doing now, every change I'm making, it's because you gave me a reason to be better." Soo-jin hugged him tightly, this man who'd gone from a feared criminal to someone trying to build a legitimate legacy. It wasn't a complete transformation. Min-ho still had connections to the underworld, still made decisions that lived in moral gray areas, but he was trying, and that was enough. "What's next?" asked Soo-jin. "I have a meeting with prosecutors next week. I'm providing information on several high-level corruption cases in exchange for immunity for my lesser offenses. Tae-sung thinks I'm insane. Are you? Probably. But I'm tired, Soo-jin. Tired of violence, tired of looking over my shoulder, tired of being the villain in everyone's story. Maybe it's time I tried being something else." "What about revenge? Won't people come after you if you cooperate with prosecutors?" "Let them try. I'm still Kang Min-ho. I might be going legitimate, but I haven't gone soft," he smiled grimly. "Besides, the information I'm providing is about politicians and corrupt officials, not my former associates. I'm not a rat. I'm just cleaning house." 5 years later. The grand opening of Kong Tower in Gangnam was the social event of the season. The 50-story mixed-use building represented the culmination of Soo-jin's first major project as CEO of Kang Enterprises, a legitimate, clean, profitable development that had nothing to do with gambling, protection rackets, or organized crime. Soo-jin, now 27, stood in the lobby greeting guests, investors, and business partners. She'd grown into her role, commanding respect through competence rather than fear. The business press called her a prodigy, the youngest CEO of a major development company in South Korea. None of them knew about the homeless shelter, the stolen inheritance, or the grandfather who'd once been Seoul's most feared crime boss. Min-ho, now 79 and officially retired, watched from a quiet corner with Tae-sung beside him. His old lieutenant had also retired, transitioning to head of security for Kang Enterprises' legitimate operations. "You did good, boss," Tae-sung said quietly. "Look at her. She's extraordinary." "She gets it from her father, the intelligence, the integrity, all the good parts. She gets some things from you, too, the determination, the strategic thinking, the absolute refusal to accept defeat." Min-ho smiled. "Maybe, but she uses those qualities to build things instead of control them. That's all her." Soo-jin spotted them and waved them over to meet some investors. As Min-ho shook hands and made small talk, he marveled at how normal it felt. No one looked at him with fear anymore, just respect for what his company had accomplished. Later that evening, after the guests had left, Min-ho and Soo-jin stood on the top-floor observation deck, looking out at Seoul's glittering skyline. "Do you ever miss it?" Soo-jin asked. "The old life?" Min-ho considered the question honestly. "Sometimes the power was intoxicating. The respect, even if it was fear disguised as respect, felt good. But then I think about what I have now." "What's that?" "You. A granddaughter who looks me in the eye without flinching, who's building something that will outlast both of us, who gave me a reason to be better when I thought it was too late to change." He put his arm around her shoulders. "I got a letter last week from Dong-hyun." Min-ho tensed. "What did it say?" He's out of prison, early release for good behavior. He wanted to apologize, said he's been through therapy, found religion, the whole redemption story. She pulled the letter from her purse and handed it to Min-ho. He asked if we could meet. What did you tell him? I haven't responded yet. Part of me wants to tell him to disappear forever, but another part wonders if people really can change. You did. I had motivation. I had you. What does Choi Dong-hyun have except fear of what I'll do if he comes near you? That's what I keep thinking about. Is redemption only real if it comes from love instead of fear? Soo-jin looked at her grandfather. What do you think I should do? Min-ho was quiet for a long moment. I think you should do whatever helps you heal. If that means meeting him and accepting his apology, fine. If it means never seeing him again, that's fine too. But whatever you decide, know that I'll support you. And if he steps out of line even once, immunity deal or not, I'll make him disappear. Soo-jin laughed. Still a little bit gangster in there, huh? Always. You can take the man out of the mafia, but some things stick. He smiled grimly. Besides, someone has to protect you. I can protect myself now. I know, but let an old man have his purposes. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the city lights. Two people who'd found each other against impossible odds and built something beautiful from broken pieces. 10 years later. Kang Min-ho died peacefully in his sleep at age 84, surrounded by family. Soo-jin held his hand as he passed, along with Tae-sung and a handful of others who'd known him in both his lives, criminal and legitimate. The funeral was attended by hundreds, business leaders, politicians, former associates who'd gone legitimate alongside Min-ho, and people who'd benefited from the various charities he'd quietly funded in his later years. And in the back, watching from a distance, was Choi Dong-hyun, older, thinner, still carrying the weight of his crimes. He never approached Soo-jin, he knew better, but he paid his respects to the man who'd given him the choice between redemption and destruction. After the service, Soo-jin stood at her grandfather's grave, reading the inscription, Kang Min-ho, father, grandfather, protector. He changed. That's a hell of an epitaph, said Tae-sung, standing beside her. It's the truth. He changed his entire life because he found me in that shelter. Soo-jin wiped her eyes. I keep thinking about all the ways things could have gone differently. If Attorney Lee hadn't found me, if Grandfather had decided I was better off without him, if I'd refused to meet him that day. But none of those things happened. He found you, he chose to change, and you gave him a reason to change. Tae-sung handed her an envelope. He asked me to give you this after he passed, said to read it.
I know I wasn't perfect, even in these last years. I still made morally questionable decisions. I still used my old connections when I thought it was necessary. But I tried, Soo-jin. I tried to be worthy of you. There's money in accounts I've never told you about, completely legitimate money from investments and real estate. It's all detailed in documents with my lawyer. Use it to expand the business, or donate it to charity, or blow it all on something ridiculous. It's yours to decide. More importantly, there's a story I never told you about why your father and I fought so much when he was younger. When Ji-hun was 15, one of my rivals kidnapped him to get to me. They held him for 3 days before we got him back. We killed the men responsible, rescued your father, but something in him broke during that time. He saw what my life really meant, the violence, the fear, the constant threat. He spent the rest of his life trying to distance himself from me, from my world. He became an accountant specifically because it was the opposite of everything I represented. And I let him go because I loved him enough to want him to be free. When he died, I thought I'd lost my chance at redemption, that I'd spend the rest of my life being the villain I'd always been. But then I found you, and you gave me a second chance I didn't deserve. Your father would be so proud of you, prouder than I can express. You have his kindness, his integrity, his unwavering moral compass. But you also have the strength to forgive,
the wisdom to see potential in broken things, the courage to believe people can change. Take care of Taesung. He's been loyal for 30 years, and his daughters see you as family. Take care of the employees who trusted us to go legitimate. Take care of yourself. And remember this, you didn't just save me, Soo-jin. You saved everyone I would have hurt, destroyed, or corrupted if I'd continued down my old path. You're a hero, even if the world never knows it. I love you more than I loved my own life. Thank you for being my granddaughter. Thank you for finding me in that shelter, because, let's be honest, I was lost long before you were. Your grandfather, Kang Min-ho. P.S. If Choi Dong-hyun ever bothers you, there's a file in the safe with enough evidence of his crimes to send him back to prison for another decade. I'm not above protecting you from beyond the grave. Soo-jin laughed through her tears at the postscript, so perfectly her grandfather. She read the letter 3 more times and then carefully folded it and placed it in a frame beside the photograph of her parents. The next morning, she went to the office early and stood in front of the portrait of Min-ho that hung in the lobby. He looked distinguished in the photo, taken during the opening of Kang Tower, smiling slightly, proud but not arrogant. "We did it," she whispered. "We actually did it." Employees began arriving, offering condolences, asking if she needed anything. Soo-jin thanked them and got to work. There was a new development to plan, expansion to Jeju Island to oversee, 100 details that required her attention. This was her grandfather's legacy now, not fear or violence, but buildings that sheltered families, businesses that employed thousands, charitable foundations that helped others the way she'd needed help years ago. And every day, she made decisions that honored both the man he'd been and the man he'd become. Tough when necessary, compassionate when possible, always remembering that people were capable of change if someone believed in them enough. 15 years later, at 42, CEO Kang Soo-jin was featured on the cover of Forbes Korea as one of the most successful female entrepreneurs in the country. Kang Enterprises had expanded throughout Asia, building sustainable housing, commercial developments, and innovative mixed-use communities. She never forgot where she came from. Every year on the anniversary of the day she left the Gwonju Women's Shelter, Soo-jin visited Mrs. Kim, who still ran the facility. Kang Enterprises funded a new wing that provided job training and mental health services, named the Kang Min-ho Second Chances Center. When reporters asked about the name, Soo-jin simply said it was named after her grandfather, a man who believed everyone deserved a second chance. She never married, though she had relationships over the years. Some lasted longer than others, but none quite worked out. When friends asked why, she'd smile and say she was too busy, but the real reason was simpler. She'd spent so many years rebuilding herself and her family's legacy that she'd become comfortable in her independence. She had family anyway. Taesung's daughters, now successful in their own right, called her auntie. The employees of Kang Enterprises were her extended family. And in a safe in her office, she kept letters from people whose lives had been changed by the company's charitable programs, by the affordable housing developments, by the second chances she made possible. One evening, as she reviewed plans for a new youth center in Busan, her assistant brought in an unexpected visitor. "There's a young man here to see you, Miss Kang. He says it's personal." "I don't have any personal appointments scheduled." "He says his name is Choi Min-jun. He's Choi Dong-hyun's son." Soo-jin's pen stopped moving. She'd never met Dong-hyun's son. He'd been away at college when all the drama happened, completely uninvolved in his father's crimes. "Send him in." The young man who entered was maybe 25, nervous but determined. He had none of his father's weakness in his face. "Miss Kang, thank you for seeing me. I know this is unexpected." "Sit down, Min-jun. What can I do for you?" "I wanted to apologize for my father. I know he stole from you, hurt you. I was away at university when all that happened, and when I found out, I cut contact with him." "You don't need to apologize for his actions." "I know, but I wanted you to know that not everyone in my family is like him." Min-jun pulled out a business plan. "I'm starting a nonprofit that helps at-risk youth transition out of the foster care system. We provide housing, job training, mentorship. I was hoping Kang Enterprises might consider partnering with us." Soo-jin took the business plan, scanning it with experienced eyes. It was well-researched, thoughtful, addressing real gaps in social services. "This is good work," she said finally. "Why come to me specifically? There are other corporations that fund this kind of initiative." Min-jun met her eyes directly. "Because you understand what it's like to have nothing. Because your grandfather gave people second chances. Because I want to prove that the sins of the father don't have to define the son." Soo-jin smiled, hearing echoes of her own journey in his words. "All right, let's discuss partnership terms. But I have one condition." "Anything." "Your father stays far away from this project. I meant what I said when I told him to disappear from my life." "He won't be involved. I haven't spoken to him for 5 years. He's not a good person, Miss Kang. But maybe I can use my family name to do some good instead, or harm." They talked for an hour about the nonprofit, about vision and implementation, about the importance of giving people the tools to rebuild their lives. By the end, Soo-jin agreed to a substantial funding partnership. As Min-jun was leaving, he paused at the door. "Thank you for taking a chance on me. A lot of people wouldn't, given who my father is." "Someone once took a chance on my grandfather when he decided to change. I believe in second chances. Just make sure you earn it." After he left, Soo-jin looked at the portrait of Min-ho that hung in her office. Different from the lobby portrait, this was a candid photo taken at a family dinner. Min-ho laughing at something, his guard down, just a grandfather enjoying time with her granddaughter. "Look at that, grandfather," she said softly. "Even Choi Dong-fun's son is trying to be better. Maybe redemption is contagious." She imagined she could hear his rough laugh, see the pride in his dark eyes. The man who found her in a shelter, who dismantled a criminal empire to build something legitimate, who proved that it's never too late to change. Soo-jin returned to her work, reviewing plans for the youth center, approving funding for the women's shelter expansion, making 100 small decisions that would ripple out and touch lives she'd never meet. This was her inheritance now, not the $2 million that had been stolen and recovered, not the criminal empire that had been dismantled, but something far more valuable, the knowledge that broken things could be repaired.